Go.
No Nation, welcome into another episode of the Renegade Rundown. Been a couple days, guys. We hate it. We missed you the last couple episodes, but of course, me and Jen made the trip down to Tally for the spring game. Oh man, what a time we had. It was amazing getting to meet you, all you guys. Tons of our subscribers and members and everything like that got to make it to the tailgate. I see Nick Snyder. He made it to the tailgate. Chuck Stone, one of our regular guys. We got to meet all kind of great Knowles. Unfortunately, Jen has been having to just fly like all over the place. So she's a little bit behind today. She's actually on the tarmac across the country for her job. She was actually supposed to be there yesterday, but due to kind of flights getting canceled out of Tallahassee and everything else, it's been one of those. So she might be able to make it with us here while Doug's here. We're not sure, but we'll just kind of wish her a safe trip as she makes it to her hotel room and getting all set up. Doug, actually, I was just talking to him off air. He didn't get to make it to the spring game. He was on a trip of his own up in Denver, but he's made it safely, it looks like, to his abode. He's there in the home studio. How's it going, Doug? Thanks for joining us.
Great.
I know you've been super busy yourself.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It actually worked out nice. I was stuck in an airplane in a flying tube for 5 hours on Monday, and it just happened to coincide with the exact time that the hearing was going on. So Delta, with a strong Wi-Fi, a strong vote of confidence for them. I'll see if I can get them on as one of your sponsors here shortly. But yeah, it was a very nice time to be able to listen in on Judge Cooper and the proceedings as I was making my way through the air. And I got real nervous there as we were starting to descend and coming down. That's when Judge Cooper was taking his break to read his case law before coming out and making the order. And I was thinking for sure he was going to be ready to come out just as they were shutting off the Wi-Fi. But we got it in under the wire and got to see the interesting news. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that some tonight.
Absolutely. Nick Snyder asked if the judge granted a stay on Jen's flight. I don't think so. I think she's made it. She's off the flight. It's all good. But yeah, I think we were all kind of nervous there for a while. I think I even messaged you on X like, is this break? Like, are we still on break? Did something happen? Are we not seeing what's going on, Doug? So, I think once somebody kicked the camera and knocked the battery out, I think at one point in time, the cameraman's battery just died and he had to swap it out. So we were on the tips of our toes for that whole thing, but we might as well rip the scab off and address, kind of the elephant in the room, and then I'll kind of turn it over to you. But, the kind of name of the thumbnail, one of the parts of the show title here is the case dismissed? That's the big thing. We hear motion dismissed, granted for the ACC, but just off the rip, I just want to emphasize, unlike in North Carolina, when Florida State got the ACC's claims of fiduciary duty dismissed with prejudice, and that was it. We were done, moving on. That is not the case here. So correct. Sorry, there is no big crazy highlight. Yes, there was a motion to dismiss granted, but the case itself is not summarily dismissed. They have an opportunity to come up with amended filing. I believe they have 7 days. Florida State does, not including weekends. So that would put it somewhere around Wednesday. They've got to have this thing turned in. And then the ACC has, I believe, 20 days to respond. Unless they deem they need more time, they're able to ask for more time. The judge made that clear as well as Florida State making clear that they withhold the opportunity to change anything. It's not just the one certain part that we'll talk about, but I'm rambling here.
That's all right. You got it all right. You got it all right.
Long story short, motion to dismiss granted, but it's, what's the next move? We find out what Florida State's going to do in that amended filing. And I'll let you take it from there. What are your thoughts just kind of on the ruling, on the day overall, and what it means going forward?
Look, we all played street ball when we were 7 years old and somebody would yell out do-over. That's effectively what's happening here. We're starting over from scratch. It's a do-over. And it really doesn't prejudice you other than the fact that you really only get one of these per case. So it's more embarrassing than problematic for the hearing, for the case. It certainly is something that you would think attorneys of this caliber would have gotten right the first time, but it does not have any negative impact on the case other than delaying it. We've talked on your show previously, and I know you've talked to Danielle Kelly. We are in a situation where at this point, both cases are likely on parallel tracks to see which one is going to get done first, if we even get that far. But if that is the case, if we are truly trying to see who can get to the end of the case first, then this is a setback of about 90 days in Leon County. I think it's the right decision. I think, at the end of the day, the Judge Cooper's hands were tied, much like Judge Bledsoe in North Carolina had to dismiss the claims of fiduciary duty on the part of Florida State. This one is more technical. This one more has to do with what was alleged, and it's a very simple allegation. I put out on a tweet earlier today, an X, whatever they're called, Zeets. The
We
long arm
still call it
statute.
Twitter. That's fine.
Yeah, the long arm statute just requires you to show that the ACC is a business that operates with some interest in the state of Florida. And they just simply didn't plead that in their documents. And it's not going to be hard. They have two member institutions in the state. They have logos all over the football field, baseball field, and basketball field. They pay into Florida State and Miami to offset their television broadcast costs and expenses. They have multiple bowl connections throughout the end of the football season with bowl tie-ins in the state of Florida. So it's a very simple process. It's very typical in civil cases to have this process that you're going through, and it ultimately is really not much of a big deal at all.
I agree. I feel the same way, and that was very, eloquently put. I think kind of for folks like me, and even folks that haven't covered it as much as me, the big kind of thing is personal jurisdiction. And you kind of spoke about that long arm statute. That's kind of the angle, as I understand it, that Florida State took. Before we get into the rest of the case and what could be possibly in that amended filing, this is the one thing kind of that the judge, was stuck on. This is the thing he had an issue with, and it really seemed like the judge, wants to go forward with it. He was willing to do anything, but Florida State, for whatever reason, and this happens, you guys can't have all the answers. You can't be ready for everything that somebody takes, and seems like they just didn't necessarily have the answer that he was looking for in the court. But just for the folks out there, what does personal jurisdiction mean? And I guess what could we possibly expect in that amended filing from that part where they could attack it from?
That's a fantastic question. And it's always a good idea to step back and just think about, we hear these terms and we hear these processes, but what are we talking about? If I am sitting at home in Georgia and minding my own business, and all of a sudden I get a complaint or a lawsuit filed against me that says I have to go down to Leon County, the first thing that the person has to show is I have connections to Leon County. Otherwise, it's very typical for plaintiffs and defendants oftentimes to file suit where the defendant resides. So if I was involved in a car accident, for instance, they could sue me in the county in which I live in. But to force me to go to Florida, you have to show that I have some ties to Florida. And just visiting isn't sufficient. Driving into Florida does not make me eligible for being sued in Florida. But if I ran a business, if I had some other ties or some other connections, then they could say, well, you're here often enough. You're connected enough to the state of Florida. That's the long arm statute. The long arm of the law, just like we hear in the songs, is reaching out from
That's right.
Florida, snatching you up by the scruff and dragging you back to Florida so that we can have this lawsuit. Hey, Jen.
As Jen says, hey, she tries to get settled in. Hopefully she can make it in. Angelo says what's up as well. Yeah, it seems like the judge loved Florida State's argument. He agrees, in the verbal explanation of, look, it's the home games in Florida. They want to say we came up and attended this meeting up here, but the ACC way more is in Florida. They're holding games in Orlando. They voted, they had a vote on whether the conference headquarters should even move to Florida. So he's with it. It just seems like they didn't put on paper or find the right statute and the right code to kind of, or precedent to point at in their case. Does that about sum it up?
That is exactly right. And you can say whatever you want in a hearing, but the judge is limited to what is in the pleadings. Now, there are occasions and the statutes and case law specifically allows where the judge can go beyond the pleadings, but then they're still talking about the exhibits, other documents that were introduced. In this case, it was kind of a whiff. It's like I said, it's more embarrassing than detrimental. It certainly isn't a great look, but that doesn't mean that this team can't put together a winning strategy and hit a home run and come from behind to win on this case.
Without a doubt. And, he made that clear. I think that was made clear by just about every lawyer out there that I saw in this. Like, yeah, it
Mhm.
was embarrassing. It wasn't a day we could write home about and, really be happy as Florida State folks, like we got a big victory. But it wasn't a giant loss. Kind of the race to the courthouse is over. You mentioned there is a kind of deal on a race to finish. So it
Mhm.
does sting kind of having this push down the road. The other kind of order he made was that mediation was, is good. It has to happen within 120 days. He made the comment that he was going to make it 90 days,
Mhm.
but given the kind of arbitrary 30-day time period, that this takes with your 7 days, call it 10 if you count business or, weekends, and
Mhm.
20 for the ACC, he added that 30 days to make it 120. From where I sit, you know, I love that. We've all said we think this thing is going to get settled, but I wonder how much good faith FSU is willing to sit down and do business with the ACC until some kind of discovery happens.
Yeah.
Like Matt Baker can't even get any of the minutes from the meeting from
Mhm.
January 12th. And there's a whole thing going on there between the AG and everything she's asked for. And so that's the only issue I have kind of with that.
Mhm.
Do we get that 120 days before any kind of discovery happens? What does that mean to Florida State? It kind of seems like they're going to have to pay the whole thing to get done with it. And
Mhm.
it seems like they're going to want to hold the ACC to their gun somehow. And I've got more comments, but I'll shut
That's
up
all
and
right.
let you go take off from there.
I think that there's a lot to be said for trying to resolve a case early, like Judge Cooper was mentioning. However, his math isn't mathing in this case, and the reason why is because yes, it is true that we are going to spend a lot more on attorney's fees over the next few weeks and months, but we're talking about probably not more than a couple $100,000. We're not talking about millions.
Yeah.
And the case that we're dealing with is over hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's one thing if you have an estate where you're fighting over assets in an estate and both sides are going to spend more money than what's in the estate to try to litigate it. That's when a quick mediation is really a good idea. Here you have two parties that feel very strongly in their position, and nobody is talking to me about what they feel behind the scenes, but until we start getting some of these rulings, until we start getting some of this discovery, I think it's going to be very hard for the two parties to reach an agreement. Now, just because you start mediation doesn't mean that's your only chance to do it. That doesn't mean that you miss out on the opportunity to settle if you can't settle at mediation. So it's a good idea to start by sitting down and starting the process. To your point, I think that the case is going to need to mature a little bit more before either party is willing. Now, the exception to that being time. I think time is one of the factors in this. And we're talking about the ESPN contract and the renewal date of February 2025. The closer we get to that, the more nervous ESPN gets because they're going to have to make a decision one way or the other, and they're going to want some clarity. So 120 days puts us around August 21st if the dates line up correctly. I'd like to see us get through the second amended complaint. I'd like to get through the next 20 days after that of the motions to dismiss from the ACC. Then, just like we saw the first time, FSU will respond to those motions to dismiss. And then the judge was talking about a hearing date on his calendar in August or September. I'd really like to see him make some room in his calendar early in August so that we can have that hearing before we get to the mediation deadline of August 21st, 22nd. Like I said, I wanted to see a resolution announced August after August 16th and before August 23rd. So the mediation date is in that window. Um, but I think that this case needs to get some clarity. There has to be some movement on this case, opinions from Judge Cooper before the ACC is going to be willing to compromise to the numbers that FSU is talking about.
So before we circle back to the rest of it, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there, talking about those dates and kind of the math and kind of the reason I mentioned that 120 days, regardless of where we get with Discovery. August 15th. That's an
Mhm.
important date. So for Florida State, we got to make our announcement pretty much before then. Now, I'm not sure exactly how it could work with you being tied up in litigation. It
Mhm.
hasn't worked. We weren't able to backdate it to last year. That ship has
Mhm.
kind of sailed. But I guess given this current situation, is there more of an opportunity there for them to say, we were wanting to leave, but we were tied up in litigation? How does that August 15th
Mhm.
date play in your mind?
So, in my opinion, FSU wants to play and is willing to play the 2025 season in the ACC. And the reason why is because it gives a little bit more orderly of a transition for a new conference partner. The 2024 schedules are set. For those people that are thinking that something's going to happen in June on June 30th to dissolve the conference, that would be absolutely incredible. I don't think it's going to happen.
We're all praying.
2024
We're
is
all
set.
praying for it.
2024 is set. There's 0% chance we're out of an ACC schedule in 2024. 2025, to your point, requires us to announce before August 15th, and then we can play a non ACC schedule in 2025. I don't know that the FSU people want that to happen. I don't know that they want us to be scheduling non ACC games in the SEC or Big Ten that soon. One of the secondary problems I see with that is that we would have to announce our departure and then also announce our new affiliation within a very short time period. And that opens up the question of tampering and tortious interference with business. I think by announcing after August 15th, so anytime August 16th and on, we can then take our time to date or court the other conferences. We already know where we're going, I believe, but it gives us some separation in there for us to make more plans. These are big schedules to change. Every sport needs to change who they're playing with. I don't see the practical reality of us playing a non ACC schedule in 2025.
Look, a couple weeks ago, I might have bucked on you on that. We've long reported that we believe here 2026 at the latest, but
Mhm.
kind of held that we had a really good feeling they'd have a chance to get it done by 2025. This
Well,
court hearing on Monday and getting this extension and what happened
yeah.
now, sitting here now, yeah, I'm of the same mind because of what I mentioned on Florida State, like it kind of relied on making some kind of discovery, some serious
Mhm.
discovery happen, in time, months away
Right.
from that date so that a legit settlement could come and Florida State could be
Mhm.
free to, as you said, okay, we're out. A couple weeks pass, have time to set up the schedules, make things happen.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, that time frame is really shrinking. So
Yeah.
outside of that kind of lottery number hitting, like you said, on June 30th, by June 30th, the whole thing dissolves. Or maybe Matt Baker finds something from that meeting and something blows up here in the next month, and that
Mhm.
really speeds up settlement talks.
Mhm.
But I tend to agree as I sit here right now with your notion that, yeah,
Mhm.
maybe it's 2026 and you go another year in the ACC because, regardless of the extension with with ESPN, they still have us. They still have those 25 and 26 schedules under lock and key. So it wouldn't be a crazy thing for us to play one more year. So
Remember,
go
the
ahead.
two most important things for FSU are getting out and getting out for a reasonable price. Those are the two things that are most important to FSU. What's most important to the ACC? Earning as much money as possible for as long as possible. So they maybe willing to take a lower bottom line number, which would make FSU happier in exchange for that extra season. And to Florida State's perspective, the math still works. Anything below $300 million, the math works. We'd want it to be below $200 million, but anything less than $300 million, it still works to switch conferences. So if we can get out for 200 or less, even if we delay it by 1 year, remember the difference in price is 15 to 20 million dollars, maybe a couple extra $1 million for the playoffs. So if we can get from 300 from 572 million all the way down to 180 million, one extra year in the ACC in exchange for that is still a net positive for FSU.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I tend to agree. It wouldn't be the end of the world. Just we need to have our future laid out, and that's Mike
Correct.
Lawford, this kind of board of trustees that we have in line, our booster association. They really get that. So as long
Again,
as just like with
mhm.
this construction at the stadium, like if we've got to look at that for one more year, whatever the case may be, we're going forward. But go ahead. I know you had something.
The whole reason why we're pushing this lawsuit and litigation now and making it public and announced it back in August of 2023, there will be a final realignment. We're just trying to make ourselves available and make ourselves available as one of the first ones. It doesn't matter when we join the new conference. It doesn't matter how the new conference is constituted. We just want to make sure that as those conferences are looking around for potential partners, they know that we're serious. And that's what's going to handcuff the Miamis, the North Carolinas, the Virginias, those other teams that are already on the cusp financially of being an asset or a burden. If they're not making themselves available, then it's just a game of musical chairs. The music is going to stop and there's not going to be seats available. So again, what matters most is where we are right now. We are telling the world, at least two other conferences, Florida State is serious about being in a different conference in the ACC. We just want you to, one of y'all to pick us.
100%. So I think this is a good question, and there was a good answer here in the chat. R. Wilmer says, so the chances of getting out cheap seems to be fading. And somebody kind of answered in the chat. Well, no. If you listen to what me and Rohan said, it's not fading. The chances of getting out cheap for 2025 is fading. So
Which I
yeah,
never thought. I never thought that there was any chance that we were going to be out for 2025. So to me, there's no change. Yes, if you were thinking that we could get out for 50 million in 2025 and not play the 2025 schedule, I'm sorry to say, but yes, that is unfortunately you started with unrealistic expectations. So yes, your bubble has burst. I think Wilmer's the same one I was talking to on Twitter, on another point. He may just be a nervous Nelly, but at the end of the day, there really hasn't been much change in certainly what I have been thinking for the last 90 or 120 days about this case.
Now, as we circle back, I know we've only got you about for another 8 or so minutes, so I want to get this last point in here. One thing that really piqued my attention, when they were going back and forth figuring out the days, whether it was going to be 7 days or 10 days, the judge kept trying to give extra time. Mr. Rush, he was like, look, we won't change anything. We'll just go in, fix that spot, add the statute, whatever is necessary in that personal jurisdiction, and make it super easy to where we can get back in here next week if need be. Well, the ACC was like, no, we're still going to want our 20 days. Judge, we need to make sure everybody has plenty of time. So then, I don't know, a minute or two later, what was said. He came back and said, okay, Mr. Rush says, well, then we reserve the right to change anything, add any amendments, redo any of the claims that we have in the entire, kind of filing. So I guess my question to you would be, what does that mean? Is that a good thing? I know it's not necessarily good or bad, but just what's the potential there? I mean, they could find something else, them having that ability,
Yeah.
I guess, what does that mean moving forward? I know I kind of
So
jumbled that up there.
you got about 70% of it correct. What was happening was, again, FSU just wanted to change the jurisdictional paragraph. They just wanted to reorganize that, but they still wanted to have the rest of the hearing essentially where they were talking about the motion to stay discovery. So Florida State was trying to make it to be simply just this one issue of jurisdiction. Everything else proceeds. And that's where Judge Cooper was saying, no, this is like running a hurdles race, and you have to clear the hurdles before we move on to the next hurdle. So he was verbally processing, like you said. Initially, he wanted to rule in favor of FSU, but as he was articulating and speaking and describing what his order would sound like, he realized it was not going to work out. And so as a result, he then said, look, I can't continue with discovery if we are still on the question of jurisdiction. That's when Florida State jumped in and said, okay, well, if you're not going to give us discovery, if you're going to say we have to rewrite this jurisdiction with no other part of the case going on, then we want the right to go ahead and rewrite everything. And the reason why that is important is because we know now from the Clemson complaint that they have this additional language in the agreements, and that they have made this other connection and this other argument that no, Clemson can unilaterally leave. Now, what that means is Florida State can rewrite their second
All
amended
the way
complaint
from beginning.
to
Yeah.
include this additional train of thought as well. So that was really the shrewd recovery. And in litigation, things, happen for a reason, and things mess up. And yes, we're supposed to be so smart, but how could we get something like this wrong? Well, maybe, I believe in a higher power. Maybe it was just so that we could go back now and stick this Clemson language, which will be a huge net positive in our complaint. So again, it's embarrassing, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. So the fact that we can now go and write a new second amended complaint with Clemson's language in there, with anything else that we've thought of during this process so far, is a net positive. Likewise, that's going to give the ACC another chance to file a motion to dismiss on the second amended complaint, put in their new thoughts and their new language, their new things that they've learned. But tactically, there hasn't really been any huge changes on the defense side, because we don't have a second litigation, a second case proceeding on that side from the ACC. So we get the benefit of hearing what the Clemson lawyers had to say, and we get to add that stuff to our complaint now as well.
Basically, they got what they want. They dragged it out, but at the same time, be careful what they wish for, because hey, they dragged it out. So now we get a view of all
Amen.
these other cases. So
Yeah,
that is pretty
exactly.
cool. I missed the very beginning of this thing. And I
Hmm.
also saw somewhere it mentioned, or maybe I misunderstood it, but at least we can get a comment on it before you go, kind of those minutes from that meeting, the kind of stink that it's coming from. So many people
Hmm.
looking for it. Did the judge mention that at all, or does that have any bearing on the case outside of it? Or I guess what's your comment on that?
Yeah. I was in and out of it also with technology problems, again,
Yeah.
traveling and getting on and off the plane. I know Danielle Kelly has been all over this. She has been really poking the bear. And of course, Matt Baker is the originator that's coming out with these stories.
Hmm.
Look, is it possible that they simply fabricated the July 12th meeting altogether and that no meeting took place? That's the conspiracy theory approach. No,
Right.
that's not likely. It's certainly possible. An argument could be made that until there's minutes, then no meeting happened, and that's not an unreasonable position to take. But it's more likely that they're just scared to divulge the information that was shared and who participated in that meeting. I don't know why it has been so hard for somebody to come up with the minutes. It's not uncommon for somebody to not take minutes or forget to take minutes, but it's usually recorded on Zoom, or you can go back later and remember who was doing what. The minutes are required. That's a mandatory filing for, business purposes. They have to go back and come up with that. Their bylaws require it. Of course, we've seen how they apply the bylaws cavalierly to some of their requirements. I believe they will come out at some point, because worst case scenario, somebody gets sit down in a corner and says, write down what you remember from the meeting. May not be totally accurate, may miss some important details, but somebody's going to know who was there. Somebody can put together an idea of what was talked about, and at least talk about the vote itself, because that was what was important. But yeah, it's one of those things that's just more curious than anything else. And clearly somebody somewhere is in charge of this not getting out and not wanting to be out. And that's going to be, a big question, is who thinks that and why. So it's an interesting storyline. It's an interesting perspective an interesting thread to keep pulling, and then we'll see where it leads us ultimately.
Yeah, I think, like you said, much more likely you kind of find out that maybe SMU or some of these new teams had more input than they should have had, than some
Hmm.
grand conspiracy. But yeah, it's just kind of funny how how Matt's bit reported it, because it's like the ACC says, oh, well, we gave it all on the security server, and the teams are like cooperating. They're like, yeah, sure, we'll look it up. Oh, nothing's there. Seems like if they had it and they just didn't want to show it, they'd be like, no comment, like
Hmm.
FSU does to me when I try to reach out with my credentials. But hey, they're super nice. No, I'm just kidding. I've got to put my
Mhm.
time in, but yeah, it's something else. But we really appreciate you coming on. I want to give you the
Yeah,
time
man.
to plug your business. Let us know if there's anything you have going on. Of course, if there's anything you have to plug, now would be the time
I
for sure.
appreciate that. Rohan Law out of Atlanta, Georgia. We handle all kinds of work accident and criminal defense cases. I really hope you don't need us. We are your best friends on your worst day. So my preference is that nobody in Knoll Nation needs to call me, but if you or a family member or a friend is in trouble in Georgia or hurt at work in Georgia, then please do remember us and give us a call. And our team would love to step in and come alongside you and help you through that process. But in the meantime, since hopefully you don't need me now, just follow us. Follow Rohan Law PC on X, and so we'll stay up to date with all the litigation that's going on. And we've got several things that are coming down the road. We got May 2nd hearings. I'm going to be a little bit late and a little bit slow on that out of Mecklenburg County because I've got to spend some time with Mike Norvell that night at an Atlanta gig. I'm very much looking forward to that, a booster gig
That's
on May
tough, man. You
2nd.
poor
Yeah.
thing. I,
So
I just don't know how you're
my
gonna get away
Twitter,
with from the
yeah,
courthouse for
my
30 minutes to do
Twitter,
that.
my Twitter may not be so hot that night, but I'll share a picture with him, of course. And then after that, we'll see when these new documents get filed in Leon County. And of course, we'll break all those down and share all the changes that we see with your viewers. And in the meantime, yeah, just keep following us on X. And every time we get some insight or something else that we think of, some nugget that we find, we'll start putting that information out for everybody.
And that's at Rohan PC, correct?
At Rohan Law.
At Rohan Law. I get that wrong every time. At Rohan Law, you can find him on X. Make sure you follow him. There's no better follow on X for everything to do kind of with this law stuff. And I know we've got a ton of fans in Georgia. I know the ton of the people we were hanging out with, like Brian Simmons, I think a couple other people on the tailgate, they had to kind of stop in Georgia to rest and
Hmm.
recuperate after the weekend before they made it home to North Carolina or Virginia or wherever they were heading. So you never know when somebody might be in Georgia and need Doug Rohan. But unless you've got anything else to add or you want to hang out a little longer, we really appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you next time, brother.
That sounds good. Take care, George. Have a good night. See
All
ya.
right, man. We'll see you next time. Doug is the man. I'll tell you what, he comes in here and just gives us the absolute scoop on this stuff. And yeah, hit every single one of my concerns. So I hope you guys were as informed as I was on that. Not a ton, not, we don't have quite as much conversation as the last kind of couple law, hearings, whatever you want to talk about. But we do have a spring game to talk about. So I'm really excited to talk about that. I just got some news from Jen. It doesn't look like she'll be able to make it, but we'll see. Maybe she can say, hey, right at the end. When you're flying and trying to get your luggage and get checked into a hotel room and stuff, we knew it was kind of a long shot, but we gave it the shot. Just happy she made it in town safe, and hopefully she gets into that hotel room and gets ready for work. So everybody wish her a great time and a safe trip over there for work. T Smiley says, hey, crazy night, but I made it fast enough to say hello. So shout out to T Smiles. She met us Friday night in College Town, and we had a blast. Hung out over at Corner Pocket, and then the tailgate the next day. We met all kind of you guys. Of course, like I said earlier, Nick Snyder, Chuck Stone. If anybody I missed you, speak up. We met Gianni, who's always in here, one of our members. It was a ton of fun. Michael Alford came by the tailgate, which was like unreal. He was there for like what seemed like an hour. Logan and those guys got to interview him at the tailgate. Jen got to give him his rendezvous barbecue seasonings and rub and stuff like that. Him and Miss Alford were just super, super gracious. They brought us a giant Tupperware slap full of chocolate chip cookies that were just the absolute bomb. I told Miss Alford it brought me back to like Christmas with my grandma, like the one year we got those kind of from scratch chocolate chip cookies. So big shout out to everybody that made it to the tailgate. I think Antone Smith came by. Let's see here. Travis Miner, I think, was by maybe for a second at the tailgate. It was really cool. I ran into my friend Jacoby McDaniel, of course, James and Chris and CJ. I'll put it on as always with Dim Media Group, Spear Addicts, and Dope Talk. Let's see who else was there. Garnet and Old. I got to make an appearance on the Garnet and Old show with Vince and Ryan. Vince actually let me take his seat, so it was just me and Ryan there. But Again, if I forgot you, say hello. If you've got any stories, if you want to make fun of me from the spring game, now is the time to make fun and do that stuff. But as far as on the field, I'm not sure how you all felt. I know there's a lot of trolls from different fan bases and things that have something to say, but I loved it, man. I could not be happier kind of with the performance. Am I happy that Malik Benson, maybe tweaked his ankle a little bit? No, that stinks. Am I like pissed off because we didn't have 300 yards and 3 touchdowns like the Miami kid did? No, what we saw was competition. We saw about kind of what we talked about seeing. It's a garnet and gold showcase. It's not a true game. You didn't see a bunch of DJU and our entire starting offensive line. He gets a bunch of walk-ons and third stringers. They really mixed it up. You had a good mix. I think DJU's line was closer to what you'll see of a kind of starting offensive line, but they also had TJ Ferguson and Keandre Jones over on that kind of second offensive line that was running for Trevor at the beginning of the game. But I will get kind of strung out here. We'll kind of go position by position. We can start with DJU. I thought DJU looked great. That one, beautiful ball to Malik Benson. He had a drop post to Darion Williamson in the end zone. I don't know if it's technically called a drop. I believe my guy Edwin Joseph was there, but all in all, how DJU played, I thought he looked great. He looked super athletic. He had a couple big runs. It's hard to really tell. You don't see the toughness when it comes to quarterback runs because obviously it's kind of a no contact jersey and being in that turquoise jersey back there. But you saw the lanes and you saw the kind of athleticism and quickness that he does possess. So I was really happy with how DJU looked out there. You can really tell that tour duty and kind of being built by storms is working for him. It's really good on him, and he looked great out there. Again, Malik Benson, dang, man, you sure hate, for him to go down. But again, everything I've heard is it's nothing serious, some kind of maybe high ankle deal, but nothing that anybody's worried about. So super happy there. Who's some other wide receivers? I mentioned Darion Williamson, kind of, a lot of what we've seen in the past with him, kind of hot and cold. He made a big play early that I really liked and then makes that drop. So you hate to see that. Vandravius Jacobs, another one of the wide receivers, caught a touchdown for Michael Grant late in the game. I was really happy to see that. Unfortunately, he decides to hit the portal. So Vandravius Jacobs, second year guy, you wish him the best of luck, but we're not going to spend a ton of time on it. There's no conspiracy theory here on Vandravius Jacobs. He's had ups and downs. He's been in the doghouse a little bit with the coaching staff, but somebody with a ton of kind of promise. I really thought if he stuck around, he could be somebody that was a real playmaker in a year or two. And shoot, he got run as a true freshman. So, he really doesn't, in my eyes, doesn't have a complaint of being passed over or not getting a fair shake. I think he got all of that. I saw some people kind of, mentioning, oh, well, he was open and wide receivers were open in the spring game. And, why wasn't Luke there? And why wasn't this person there? And they got a right to be frustrated. I'm not buying any of that, guys. I trust this staff. Vandravius Jacobs, I hate to see you go. Best of luck to you. But no matter where you go, they're going to bring wide receivers in every year. They're going to bring him into high school. They're going to bring him in out of the portal. So unless he goes to some lower school where he can just be the absolute alpha and be the star, and they're not going to be able to get a recruit over him, I don't know what to tell him. So I don't have any kind of behind the scenes story of any particular thing that happened here or there, but all I know is that he's gone. So we'll move on from that. Move on to some other wide receivers. Kentron Portier had a pretty good day. I believe he might have had a chance at a touchdown that he didn't finish either. Nobody really stood out. There was no just wide receiver that just broke off and went crazy. But again, and we're going to get to defensive backs in a little bit, but I think that's kind of the story of the day. Not so much that the wide receivers we have aren't good, just that the secondary is without a doubt one of the very best in the nation. Jeff Hill comes with a $20 super chat. We appreciate you, Jeff, so much. He's been here since day one, been one of our key members, passing out memberships, making it rain like every week. So we really appreciate you, Jeff. He says, I like the running game. I thought the running backs looked good. The defensive line looked good. Secondary, I tell you what, Marvin Jones Jr. looks like the real deal. I agree with all of that. I was going to running backs right after wide receivers. Jalen Brown looked good out there. I don't want to leave him out. Um, but we can go to running backs. I can't take. We're going to talk about this running game. Going into the game, I told you guys I went on to Garnet and Old, and they asked me, what are two things that stick out to you? What are two things you're looking forward to seeing in the spring game? And the two answers I gave him was what I just told you about DJU. I want to see how in sync he is with the wide receivers, kind of how in sync he is with his center, with the offensive line, making checks, all those things. Well, he passed all those tests. I thought he looked great. He showed me everything I needed to see, regardless of what the trolls might say. The second thing, the running game. I've said over and over on this show, I think we're going to have the most yards from running backs that Norvell has had since he's been at Florida State. I think you're going to have the best offensive line, especially with run blocking that he's had since he's been here. And when you kind of look at the stable of running backs, you bring Toa Philly back for another year. You've basically had the pleasure of keeping Toa Philly in your toolbox. You've had him pretty much the entire time Mike Norvell's here, and he's reached his peak. He's like really that guy right now. I really love Toa Philly. You didn't see a ton of him in the spring game, as you shouldn't. We know exactly what we got. But what you saw him in that Louisville game, running the Wildcat, winning MVP, we've heard from everybody in the staff like he's even better now. So you have Toa Philly. To bring in a Roy Dell Williams next to him, the best way I can describe it is you kind of get the best traits from Trey Benson and the best traits from Trayshawn Ward, and you get him in one. Well, and then people immediately say, oh, well, he's not as fast as Trey Benson. He doesn't have that kind of top end speed. And I agree. I'm not saying he does, but what he does have is an extra gear that Trayshawn Ward didn't have. He can break those for the distance. The difference in getting hawked by a safety and a linebacker or taking it to the house, like he has that. He has that gear to take it. We saw a little bit of it there in the spring game on, I believe it was about a 40-yard run. So really, really excited to see. And on that big run, it was right through the A gap. And I mean, he had to skip over legs. I'm not sure if it was the offensive or the defensive lineman's tangled up, but just a really beautiful thing. It was like Trayshawn Ward cutting through the hole. And when he turned on the afterburners, it looked like Trey Benson taking off. So super excited to see what he can do. Everybody here knows I've been a giant fan of Keziah Holmes. Make me the number one fan of the number one member of the Keziah Holmes fan club. Well, and then here I was a week ago on the show saying I'm worried about Keziah Holmes. Is there a chance he transfers out? What's going on? Because he hadn't had the best camp. He was super, super excited going into this camp. I knew for a fact he was fired up, wanting to go in there, compete, possibly win a starting job. Then they bring in Wardell Williams, and they bring in a Jalen Lucas. Well, I was worried. There's a chance. There's only so many miles to feed. Mike Danzy isn't even on campus yet. We haven't talked about Sam Singleton, who looked good in the spring game. Well, the spring game started off, and Keziah, was getting touches right off the bat. He has a fumble, big fumble, and here, man, that's not what he needed. Boy, I hope he doesn't shut down. I was kind of worried, but to his credit, he shook it off. And he showed the Keziah, he showed the enthusiasm that I saw from him at the end of the year, going into spring, and he went off the rest of the game. I mean, he would not be denied. He took that one big pop on the goal line and fought forward for a touchdown. I put a little video up on Twitter. I actually got that one there from the Champions Club. So I was super happy to see the way Keziah bounced back. And I just think if Toa Philly, Roydell Williams, and Keziah Holmes can really stick together, you've got a real nice kind of traditional 3 running back set there. And then I just mentioned him, Jalen Lucas. The guy is just a playmaker. He's just all over the field. He's like Ja'Kai Douglas, but just more of a natural at the running back. I feel like Ja'Kai really is kind of more of a slot receiver that can play running back. I think he's more of a running back. Jalen Lucas's case that can play slot receiver if need be. But yeah, the guy's just a dynamo, that kind of low center of gravity. If you've ever watched the Garnet and Gold Showcase, as most of you here probably have, in between possessions, they don't do punt returns. They just kick a punt, the guy catches it, that's it. They take over from the 25 or wherever Mike Norvell decides to for that drill or that part of the showcase. But in between these different quarters, or however they want to call it, halves of the spring game, they would have drills where they did do live punts. I believe 2 of them back to back. And boy, I mean, you just saw it, whether it was they were running a kick return or a punt return in those drills in between drives. Jalen Lucas just really, really looked great. And there's somebody else I'm forgetting that I was out there catching him that I was surprised that also looked good. But it's no doubt to anybody out there that our special teams would be off the chain. Landon Thomas looked pretty good out there. I'm not going to lie. It's not sticking out to me much. I need to watch the game a couple more times to really watch how well he did. But I know the young man, Jackson West, is the tight end that kind of caught my eye the most. Watching it live as much as I could, and kind of the one time I watched it back on replay, Jackson West is another guy that we talked about on this show, possibly, having to look around, possibly consider transferring out. I feel a lot better. I mean, he really looked great from everything we've heard. So yeah, we'll see. At this point, I'm hoping Jackson West decides to stick it out because he's really showed those flashes in that spring game, being up for it. So we'll see. It won't be an end of the world if he did leave or anything like that. But from what I saw, it seems like the staff, they're ready to give it to him, and he's ready to catch it. So shout out to him for putting on a good performance out there. Before we move to the defense, I talked about the offensive line at the beginning, but it's the offensive line. There's nothing big flashy. It's not like, it was complete domination over the defensive line, because we have, again, one of the best defensive lines in the nation. But when you go back and watch the plays that worked, when you go back and watch just kind of the competition going on between the offensive and defensive line, it's just another level, guys. Darius Washington out there, I mean, he just looks like an NFL tackle. Ferguson looks like an NFL guard. Like, it looks like championship top level college football out there. It really is. Keandre Jones, I know James particularly really likes him. Thought he might could play for a starting position. We'll see. We'll see. Him, Richie Leonard, Terrence Ferguson. It's unreal. It's an embarrassment of riches what we have inside. And then you got Maurice Washington, or Maurice Smith, excuse me, Maurice Smith, who's holding down that center position. He started the spring game snapping to DJU, so I imagine he'll be that guy. I don't see anybody coming in and passing him up, but really a beautiful thing. I couldn't be happier. My opinion on the offensive line has not changed one bit. And then over to the defensive line, I saw somebody mention that Marvin Jones Jr. just looked like an absolute freak out there. And yeah, he did. He really does. He looks like that guy. He looks like a Spartan out. You saw him have to go out into space. He runs different. He's different than even, Jared Verse, and kind of that, I'd say, lateral agility. Like, if he had to play the pass, as much as both of them are more suited to be pass rushers, I think, Marvin Jones Jr. may be a little bit closer to that guy that could possibly play in Georgia's offense. Or defense, excuse me. So, should Adam Fuller want to call something, put him out there in coverage a little bit more than we have in the past, he could handle that. I'm not saying that he will do that, just saying he could handle it. MJJ, he's an absolute freak out there. There's no doubt about it. Daryl Jackson is Daryl Jackson. Of course, we didn't get to see Josh Farmer, but Mark Rogers was asking us about potential all ACC selections, and yeah, Josh Farmer, he's the top of that list. I'm not worried about him. Patrick Payton, the same thing. We saw some good stuff out of a lot of guys. Aaron Hester was the all-stat guy, another guy that we sat here and talked about. Man, he's been here 2, 3. How long has he been here? Been here a while. Haven't done a ton. We really thought he could come in and be a pass rusher, but he sure looked the part in that spring game. So I'm not here to say he won't leave or this or that, but I would take him off my list of guys that would possibly leave, to kind of go chase a spot on the depth chart. I think he kind of learned a lot of respect in that locker room, and his spot's kind of locked in. So really proud of what I saw out of him. I could sit here and bullshit you guys. There's not anything specifically that Tamiwa or any of the new guys, Siono Lolohea, did that really stuck out to me. If there's something that stuck out to you, if there's any questions you have, speak up. We just saw a lot of good action, and I'd have to really go back and study kind of the trench play to see anything. But from what I saw, just a lot of battles, and I can't wait to see this defensive line play against somebody else. I think a lot of people look and see what happened there, and it was kind of a boring, nothing happened. There weren't a ton of points scored, but at the end of the day, if you've got, a team that's ready to compete for a championship, or you hope you can go into the season and compete for a championship, you know, a draw, that's the best thing. That's what you kind of would imagine. Boots is locked in. Somebody says yes, absolutely. Boots probably had the second best game after Aaron Hester. Looking at it, he really did look great out there. So yeah, I agree. Um, I saw somebody posted something and I retweeted it on Twitter today, and it showed all the defensive linemen that have been drafted in the past 20 years. I believe it was Ohio State and Alabama at the top with like 30. And as you go down the list, there's Florida State, Florida, a lot of these teams, with 24, 25, 26, something like that. And, 10 of the 20 teams off that list is like all the national championships in the past 20 years. It really goes to show how important getting defensive line and developing them to an NFL level is for success. And there's a lot of talk about what Mike Norvell does in recruiting and does not do in high school recruiting. But when you look at what he's done at the portal, 2020, you bring in Fabian Lovett. Where's he now? He's headed to the NFL. 2021, you bring in Jermaine Johnson. He's one and done. First rounder. The next year, you bring in Jared Verse. You get 2 great years out of him. Last year, you bring in Gilbert Edmond. That wasn't great. Didn't work out. He's gone. But you know who else you brought in? You brought in Braden Fisk, and he was the one and done. Likely, I'm going to go ahead and say it now, likely first rounder. I legitimately think he gets in the first round. The consensus, I think, is somewhere in the late 30s. But, another pretty unbelievable grab. You brought a Jaden Jones. We're not sure how he'll play out yet. He's got his brace off. I'm expecting big things out of him. Really, the kind of only 2 defensive linemen that they've taken out of the portal that didn't really work out are Gilbert Edmond, and the other one is Jarrett Jackson, I believe, from Louisville. But you look at this 2024 class of Marvin Jones Jr., Sione Lolohea, Tomiwa Dorojaye, and Grady Kelly. I have no doubt that at least three of these guys are going to be big time players for us. So yeah, super excited. I think we're going to be just fine. And when you look at defensive tackle, there's way more out there. There's a chance we could get our Braden Fisk. There's another guy dropped from Michigan State. I think Bud Elliott called this thing out. I think like 7 of the top 10 tackles in the entire conference have hit the portal. It's like crazy. So there's tons of defensive tackles out there on the market, which is great for us because Florida State, one of the top kind of positions it's at after in the portal is defensive tackle. But not to get lost in there, I want to keep going through kind of the rest of the positions. Linebacker is the next one. Blake Nicholson. Boy, he shined. He kind of flashed in that spring game, and kind of put play on the field from what we've heard all spring about where he is. He's a lot better, a lot tougher filling the holes on run plays. He's still out there in coverage just as good as he's always been. I've been absolutely blown away, as I've told y'all many times since I saw him in that Southern Miss game. Of course, the young man, dang it, I can't never think of his name. Juice, the young true sophomore that we brought in, the transfer from Northwestern last year, is just phenomenal. He's becoming like 10 times the player I ever thought he could be. Like, just honestly, just looking at it, I thought Northwestern, here's another reach by Randy Shannon. I was not super happy. I wasn't, super pumped. At the same time, last year, it's not like you expected a ton out of him. He was a true freshman, even though he was a transfer. But kind of the strides he's taken and what he's done this camp, boy, he has proven me wrong. And, really goes to show why you got to study the tape and learn about the young men before you just kind of throw an opinion out there, because he has been a beast. So really happy there. Sean Murphy, I think, is a little dinged up. I didn't see a ton. Again, another one I have to really go back and study. If there's anything there that I missed at linebacker, anything that stood out to you that maybe I forgot, speak now or forever hold your peace on that. But the one I've been wanting to talk about since we started, the number one position group kind of on this team, if you ask me, and if you ask a lot of people out there, is going to be defensive back. Now you've got all different kind of categories. Of course, you got safety, you got nickel cornerback, and you've got your two starting outside cornerbacks, your boundary corner and your field corner. But there's just not a weakness. There's not a weakness on the team at DB. We all know Greedy Vance at the portal. Is there a chance another hits? Obviously, there's obviously a chance another could hit with 5 freshmen coming in and the guys off the portal. Um, but our coach, Patrick Surtain Sr., has really kind of focused in on his type, what he wants. You saw that bringing in Earl Little Jr. out of the portal. You saw that with him going out and signing what I believe is the top DB class in the nation in his first year. You saw what he can do coaching these guys as he coached a DB unit up that he just inherited. Tons of talent. Don't get me wrong. It's not like he inherited a weak room. He had tons of talent across the board. But to come in first year and have the number 3 DB room in the nation, pretty impressive by Pat Surtain, and he doesn't seem to be slowing down at all. We signed a kid, Jalen Waters, who he isn't ranked by all the services yet, but by most of the people you talk to, he could be the top corner in 2026, and we'll see. We see a lot of kids show up a lot earlier, so I'll just say that and I'll leave that there. But he is a 2026 kid, but he's a kid that he could play on college teams right now. He's that good. They call him the seatbelt, so watch out for that guy, Jalen Waters. He's going to be a beast. Just committed today, so look out for seatbelt. But back to the corners on the team. Let's start with my guy Az Thomas. What is there to say? I mean, he's that guy. He's probably going to be first team All ACC. We could see some like legitimate nationwide All American love there. As much as I'd love to see him for 2 more years, he's probably gone after this year, and he's going to have a good chance to go super early. I think he has a higher ceiling than anybody else on the team. Then maybe Conrad Hussey. I feel like Hussey has the same kind of ceiling, but cornerback is just valued a little bit more than safety these days. So that's how that is. He's got a legitimate chance to be the highest DB taken since Jalen Ramsey. So we'll see. I could be wrong. A lot of people could be wrong because there's a lot of people out there. The popular question, I think Clay Fink was the first one to ask it or to say it, is that he's like the best player on this team, period. Now, like I've been talking about the potential for years. Last year, I said, wait till he makes the next step. He's going to be this and that. But no, right now, as we speak, Azaria Thomas, one of the best players in the country, if not the best covered corner going into this year in the country. So super excited to see what he can do. There's not much you can say about that. Fintrell Cypress on the other side of the field. Fintrell Cypress is a guy that took a lot of heat playing that field corner last year. And it's one of these things. It just seems like, and I was talking to somebody the other day about this, that the field corner just always takes heat. It's just something that happens. They're on TV a lot in trail technique, whether it's in cover 2 and they pass them off to the safety or whatever the case may be. They take a lot of heat. He came from Virginia, where I'm sure it probably wasn't as physical for him. He didn't get attacked quite as much. He probably played a lot more cushions, gave a lot more cushions to guys, but you really see it looks like he's put on a couple pounds. If anything, just changed fat into muscle. He really looks solid out there and is just another level of the physicality. That's one thing I really noticed. Super, super physical in man coverage and just Velcro. He made some really great plays and made it super tough for guys out there. So, you could have a thing where AZ's first team and Fintrell's second team. I don't think you're going to end up getting both guys on the same line just because. But yeah, I don't see a DB in the secondary that isn't having a shot for some kind of All ACC status. When you look at the slot cornerback, it was kind of between Greedy Vance, Earl Little Jr. I think it's pretty much going to be Earl Little's junior spot, looking at it right here and right now. But let me tell you who's coming, and that's Edwin Joseph. Boy, did he look good out there. The guy, I don't know, like if he's just gained traps on top of traps, but like his arms out there, he looked like, again, like a little Spartan out there outside. So I really love what I saw out of him. I'm not sure what happened on the one play where he was in trail technique. I know people were upset about that one play, but besides that, he broke up that touchdown to Williamson and was just all over the place. Super physical against the run and everything else. So Edwin Joseph, I'm not going to be forgetting his last name like I was having trouble there mentioning it when we were talking about how much he stood out in spring practice. So super happy to see what I saw to him. Kevin Knowles was out there in a turquoise jersey, another name that's you know he fought for starting at that corner, that slot corner role 2 years ago in 2022. He got moved to safety last year. Didn't quite work out, but he's back to that slot cornerback. So really excited to see what he can do if he can stay. And obviously, since he was in that turquoise jersey, he was doing something right on the team. And hopefully, maybe he's locked in. Maybe he stays, and we can just be loaded right there with some veteran talent there behind the young talent in the front. As we move to safety, I'll start with Conrad Hussey because, it's between him and AZ. It's crazy how DBs are always my favorite players. But again, Hussey is somebody who I preseason was like, he's the rookie. He's going to be the breakout player of the year. And that prediction officially came true. They had an award ceremony, I believe, Sunday. They call it the Golden Knolls or something like that. And he was the offensive breakout player of the year, or the offensive rookie of the year. Not, excuse me, defensive rookie of the year. That is Conrad Hussey. So shout outs to him. I'm super glad to see him kind of live up to my crazy expectations I lobbed upon him on the show. But dude's ready to have a breakout year. I can't wait to see what he looks like. I feel bad for the first DB for Georgia Tech or whoever it is at home, maybe Boston College, whoever he gets that first hit stick on. They're going to feel it. And Shaheem Brown coming back for his senior year is just at this point a grizzled veteran. You saw him kind of just take leaps year after year. Last year, play kind of at an all-conference level. This year, I've kind of likened it to he's just kind of like an NFL player. He's just coming back, just a safety that's ready to just play his part, kind of like Renardo Green was last year. Maybe not to where he was a draftable prospect, but a guy that was ready. So just going to be trying to put on tape for the NFL this year for Shaheem Brown, and if he can stay healthy, he's going to be a big part back there. The one guy, Devontae Brown, he's another one. I'm not going to lie. I didn't really. It's nothing's coming to mind on any big plays in the spring game, or if he was even out there, I probably couldn't tell you right now. But I do know that he has um, just blown people away, and there's like real talk of him fighting for starting positions and things like that. He's been the first safety out of Mike Norvell's mouth quite a bit. So yeah, really good, looking good there at safety. Three deep, really, with those three guys in that rotation. I think you've got the perfect kind of group you need to make it through the year if they can stay healthy. I still hold down that I really would like to get one more linebacker. I think if you could have the same position at linebacker that you have at safety, I'd be happy. And just kind of with Juice and Sean both being sophomore and redshirt sophomore, and the same thing with Blake Nicholson, I would like to have one more guy to go with Lundy that really has kind of some experience there. But I've been yapping off for the last 30 minutes. We're at an hour and 2 minutes. I'm going to open the phone lines. If you've got any questions for me, now is the time. Any questions about the spring game or anything else, whatever I'm forgetting at this point in time in the show, now's the time. So I'm going to go ahead and throw that number up there and check the chat. I know I've kind of been ignoring the chat, but when I'm by myself, I just wanted to make sure I went through everything and got you guys all caught up. What's up, Cornelius Green? Thanks for joining the show, man. We really appreciate you and everybody else. As always. Air Roll says, what positions on both sides are concerning you at the moment? What to buy in the transfer portal? Now, concern, I wouldn't say is the right word because there's not a position unit that I'm like worried about. It's not like going into 2021 and I'm like, who the hell are our receivers? Like, what are we going to do? There's no real concern there. And I know I already kind of mentioned it at the beginning, but defensive tackle is a place when you look at Daniel Lyons and KJ Sampson kind of being that second wave coming out behind Daryl Jackson and Joshua Farmer. You would like to have a couple more guys. And I don't have the names off the top of my head. I believe the one that hit today from Michigan State is the best one yet. And a Barrow was his last name. You've got the guy who just left Miami today, Huntington Steele or something like that. So there's options. There's real options. There's a real solid about 5 options out there at defensive tackle. So that's one that I would definitely like to go spend some money in the transfer portal. Let's get some of those guys in. And again, I mentioned wide receiver. I'm not concerned. It's not a big deal. I'm not freaking out that, we didn't have a Keon Coleman moment out there. We didn't have a Johnny Wilson out there just too tall, being able to jump too high, just too fast. We didn't have that. But again, when you've got NFL DBs, at every station of the secondary, you're not going to have that. But at the same time, yeah, there is room. I think you go out and get a guy that can come in and fight for a legitimate starting position, to be a guy. We don't have that guy out there. We don't have Keon. That's the one thing we're missing. We've got a ton of guys, kind of freshmen, sophomore, juniors, all the way on up to the experienced guys, Kentron Portier, Ja'Kai Douglas. We've got the young studs, the true freshman studs. We've got the true sophomore studs like Jalen Brown and Hakeem Williams. We just don't have that proven, legit a number 1 draft pick out there at wide receiver. So if that guy is the guy at Penn State who had like 50 catches and almost 700 yards and 4 touchdowns with Drew Allers, if that's him, if we can get him here, I'm all for it. I don't know a ton about the guy. I don't think he's quite as explosive as, a Keon Coleman, but I think he's kind of what we all wish Malik McClain would have been, at Florida State. So he's somebody that I would definitely want. We'll definitely see. But just right offhand, definitely, I want a playmaker linebacker, a playmaker at defensive tackle, a playmaker at wide receiver. Those are kind of my 3 things. I don't think we really need depth or numbers anywhere, with just some true kind of guys to come in and help you win now out of the portal. That's who you're after. And as far as guys that might get pushed out and things like that, we told you from the square one, it could be up to 10, 14 guys. Well, it's been really slow. We've only had a couple here. Greedy Vance hit. We're going to see what happens. I know there's going to be more. We're at like 88, 89 scholarships, and we have a scholarship reduction. So it's like, by the numbers, it's 7, 8, 9 guys minimum, that have to go. Just how it's going to be, especially if you're going to bring in a couple guys. So we'll see what happens here in the next couple days. I think you'll start to see people hit. And it's not the end of the world. It is what it is. It's just the new kind of world we live in, that guys are going to leave. Vandravius Jacobs leaving stinks. He wasn't one of the guys that I was hoping to leave that would just, it's one of the ones that stink. But at the end of the day, he was a 3-star, I think, by the consensus. He's a short guy. All the hope in the world that he goes out there and kills it, but it doesn't kill you. He's not the kind of thing that kills you. There's plenty of guys where he came from. What we need for this season is somebody that's ready to come in and be that a number 1 or 1B. So we'll see what happens there, because as much as I love Portier, as much as I love a lot of these guys, they just have not shown the ability to do it consistently on game day. Plenty of potential out there, but we'll see what happens. Malik Benson, I love him, but you don't want to get stuck in a position where like Alabama was with a couple of years ago, where they got Jermaine Burton and he's going to be our guy, and and everybody was disappointed. I don't think you have that kind of situation here with Malik Benson. I'm just saying, in order for Malik Benson to get the maximum kind of output of what you need from him, you'd like to have a guy like the kid from Penn State, a big guy who can really, be your number 1 on the other side, to where that him spreading the field and taking the top of it gives you that true maximum effect. But again, guys, the phone line is open. Think I've hit just about anything and everything that kind of I had on my mind when we went into this thing. So if you have any questions for me, now is the time. Speak now or forever hold your peace, as we hit an hour and 10 minutes. Again, unfortunately, Jen had some trouble with the airport and everything and flying across the country, so she wasn't ready to or able to make it tonight, but she will be back. We'll be at Friday and Sunday as normal, back in our normal schedule 3 times a week. And we've got some fun stuff, fun new stuff, new content coming for you guys. Still working on a show with her and Tiny Hat that should be coming any day now. So stay tuned. We really love you guys. I'm going to give you guys, we'll call it 1:15. I'll give it 5 more minutes with you guys in the chat. If you have any questions, call the line, put them in the chat, and we'll do it like that. I don't know what we're talking about here, but he says, you mean the punchable faced clown Kirk Herbstreit? Where is that sucker hiding at? This guy? Y'all talking about this guy in the chat? He's such a bitch. Let's see here. Oh, there it is. Hey, George, where's your Kirk Herbstreit bozo defense? Here it is. Here he is. Oh, Kirk. Kirk and the boys. It's really not looking like I'm going to be able to make it to Ireland, but I will definitely get this to somebody that does get to Ireland, and we're going to make him eat his words. Talking to people at the program, we were able to make it to the moon, to that Battle's End, silent auction, I guess you would call it, where Mike Norvell spoke. That's where we initially got to meet Mr. Alford and his wife. We got to meet all kind of cool people. But just talking to all the people around, nobody's forgot. Nobody's forgot. It's just not the crazy, country folks like me out in the woods that are pissed. It's not just the Memphians like Memphis that are ready to put a size 7 heel up his ass. Like, it's everybody. It's the boosters. It's everybody I talk to. Like, he's gonna get a piece of everybody's mind. He can't go to McDonald's. He can't go to Ruth Chris's. It doesn't matter where. He can try to hide over there. We're going to take over Ireland, and people are going to know. They're going to make him know it, especially at game day. Whatever they do that game day, I tell you what, they better keep it under lock and key, because somebody's going to, like, I don't know, fly a plane over it and drop tomato juice. I don't know, but he's got some kind of uncomfortable situations coming over there. That's for damn sure. The Rock and Roll Pepper Show says, George, hey George, how was it? Hanging with Jen in person. So cool that y'all got a chance to meet. How was it hanging with Jen in person? Just like hanging with Jen on the podcast. It was really awesome. She's everything that you expect. She is just Jen Santee. We had an absolute blast. She got in Thursday. I got in a day later. I got in Friday around noon. We went to Mad Social. I think that's where we kind of met up we met at the hotel. We took an Uber. We went to Mad So. We went and got some lunch. We tried that BLT dip that everybody raves. Now, I'm not here to talk crap about Mad So. It was a blast. We got to meet some cool people in there, but the BLT dip, it wasn't, like, I didn't see what all the hype was about. But where I will rave about Madison Social is, let me get this. I don't know if I'm getting this wrong. So if anybody goes there a lot and I'm saying it wrong, I believe it's the Bourbon Chicks Sticks, but it was these chicken tenders, kind of like bourbon chicken, like you would have a Chinese restaurant style, except for it was just the glaze. There was no sauce on it. I don't know if they sprinkled MSG or crack or what on it, but holy shit, these are the best 2 chicken tenders I ever had in my life. And it came with a big fluffy Belgian waffle. So yeah, if you're ever there for breakfast, lunch, whatever, the Bourbon Chick Sticks, it's like it's their take on chicken and waffles, and it might be the best damn thing I've eaten at a restaurant in years. So shout out to Madison Social for that. But after that, what was that, Friday night? Like I said, we walked around College Town, checked out Bowden's and stuff like that. But we ended up going to that event at Moon. That was a ton of fun. We did that, and then of course Saturday was the tailgate in the spring game, and that went off without a hitch. We really got to meet a ton of people. Hopefully y'all made it out, and if you didn't, you guys got to make it to the next one. Of course, there'll be our first 2 games of the year, our home games, I believe. We have Boston College when we get back from Ireland, and then a bye week, and then we come back for Memphis. So definitely make it out and see us if you missed it this time. But yeah, she's the exact same person you see on here. I won't pick on her too much. We'll get into stories of things that happen, and I'll pick on her when she gets back on the show. But she's not here to defend herself, so we won't give her too much help. Emrook says, Glenn Chromahawk going to redshirt and further develop. I'm not sure on the red shirt for Glenn. Glenn likely to be the backup. Maybe that's what you were doing. Maybe you were answering a question from farther up. That's probably what it is here. Cornelius Green says, "Who do you think will be quarterback 2 between Glenn and quarterback?" Yeah, I agree. Glenn more than likely is going to be your quarterback number 2 heading into the year. Um, I highly doubt Luke jumps into that role. It seems like if you have a chance to redshirt him, you redshirt him. But that said, I have heard there's been some practices where it looked like, oh shit, oh shit, maybe is Brock gonna? What does Brock think about this? Because Luke's coming. Like, make no mistake. So we'll see what happens. If by the end of fall camp, Mike Norvell thinks Luke Cromenhawk gives you a better chance to win than Brock Glenn, it's going to be Luke Cromenhawk. But given how tough this offense is, and just kind of everything we've heard about Brock Glenn and how determined he is and how great of a camp he had, hard to believe, because to be that younger player, to beat the older guy out, especially just for a backup position, it's really tough. You really just got to blow them out of the water. Like and you see it in the NFL all the time. Like the third string quarterback may be more likely to be the starter than the second string. It's just the backup needs to be ready for that kind of just to play that role as a backup. So maybe I'll end up biting my words there, but hopefully Brock Glenn is the backup. Cromenhawk can redshirt this year, and then we get into that competition between Brock and Glenn in 2025, and that's it. If one of them is upset and leaves at that point, I would totally understand it. But I truly believe it'd be the best interest of all three to stick it out and just develop, just climb with each other this year. Trevor Jackson, of course, a lot of hype around him, Trevor Jackson, because Luke and Glenn obviously were shut down the last couple weeks, or maybe it was just the last week of spring practice. But I thought he did damn good. To be a true freshman, preferred walk on to come in and kind of be thrust into that position. He did really well. I thought Michael Grant also did really well as well, getting in there. But again, I'm rambling. I really appreciate you guys as we come up on an hour and 20 minutes. See if y'all have any more questions here. Wilmer, get any famous FSU honey chicken on campus? I hate that you bring that up, because now that I think about it, I did show up on a Friday. I'm starting to get a little bit of connections here, so I got to remember that next time. I'll have to get in town for Friday on the Boston College game and get some of that honey fried chicken, but I didn't. This go round, I just got like I said, we tried the BLT dip, but the cream cheese type stuff just isn't for me. But the bourbon chick sticks were off the chain. Also, the Bloody Mary at Madison Social was off the chain. One of those thin Bloody Marys that really has the good taste to it. So I'm not a drinker, but I will have a good Bloody Mary every once in a while, and they had a good one there. Did I miss the Keon story? I'm not sure what Keon story it is you mean. So maybe if you elaborate a little bit, I could help you out on that one before we get out of here, Mr. Wright. But I'm not sure exactly what you mean there. Also, hey George, y'all mentioned that y'all were filming some stuff with you and Jen in Tallahassee. I was wondering when you were gonna put that out. So we didn't actually get around to like filming a show or anything, but we did get some really cool footage. I got a whole bunch of footage of kind of plays in the spring game from the Champions Club around campus, and also a couple different cool videos and pictures with all different kind of people from the tailgate. I already put a couple of those out on my Twitter, but I'll go through it all, and we'll definitely do something. I'll put out some content for sure with some of that. We wanted to do some stuff and go live from Tallahassee. Wanted to do a show and stuff, but with us, I've got my studio here. Jen's got her studio in her house. We're still we don't have a ton of equipment for, going on the road, kind of like Garner, an old setup, how they had all that. But we're working, we'll get there. I know that's kind of an excuse, but it was a lot of stuff coming together for us the weekend. Really, the main thing was about networking, meeting as many as you guys as we could, being able to meet people around the program and kind of follow through on the things we promise to do for everybody. So that was that. But make no mistake, we are going to have more and more content. And as the season comes, hopefully I'll be ready to go down there and just kind of be ready to go to work, vlog and stuff like that. But yeah, we'll definitely release what we have, and we appreciate all the support, all 400 of you that are in here watching right now. We appreciate you for sure. As I look through here to see if we have any more questions before we close it out. Absolutely, Nick says it was loaded at the tailgate, and it was. That food was off the chain. I went to, I think, 4 of these last year, and the food was never better. This food was absolutely off the chain. Freddie, the famous cook that hooked it up for Big Game James, CJ Wilson, Chris Frazier, myself, everybody that made it out, he killed it. They had jambalaya with sausage and shrimp. They had burgers that were just not your regular cookout burgers. He had them things seasoned up right. They were really awesome burgers. Hot dogs and stuff cooked right. Of course, you always got to have your hot dogs, but the mac and cheese was just on point, legitimate, like homemade mac and cheese. They had the craziest banana pudding you ever eaten in your life. It was really, really good. Oh, ribs. That was the kind of finale. They usually get the regular cookout meal buffet done, and once that's all done, then some ribs or some whatever the kind of the special thing is for that tailgate comes out. And his ribs this go around were just unreal. He kept them coming till even after the game there. So again, it was a successful tailgate. Shout out to everybody, Lisa, Adrian that helped out with the tailgate. We saw Mike, the pedicab guy there. Shout out to him for making it easy as he always does. All the players and things that made it by. It was an absolute blast. Yeah, I don't. There was talk about with Keon Coleman and all that stuff, but that's all in the past unless something different happens. So we won't get into that. There was just a situation with a recruit where maybe he didn't speak as highly as we would have liked. Um, but uh, but no, as far as I know, everything's good with Keon. He's a friend of the program. He's coming back to town and stuff like that. So all good there, unless there's something I just haven't heard. And sorry for making you guys hungry, but I'm telling you guys, the tailgate, those bourbon chick sticks from Madison Social. They were all great. Oh, also we went to the Corner Pocket, so I can't leave them out. They had some really good wings. Their wings and their burgers there are also on point. That's where we went and ate dinner Friday night. So I can't lie. They had some good stuff there too. Jim was able to meet Jeff Cameron and Corey Clark there. Um, I kind of just hung off to the side there for that one, but so many cool people. Jeremy Ivins, a guy that is always in the comments and hanging out on Twitter. We got to meet him and hang out with him. It was a ton of fun. So if you've not made it to an FSU game of any kind, be it spring game, home game, away game, anytime you can kind of get away from the house and get around FSU people, that whole thing about it being family that you hear from all the recruits and everything else, it's real. It really is family. Nobody's, too good for anything. Nobody's this or that. You never know who you're going to run into. Sitting there watching the spring game, Braden Fisk walked, right up next to us, got up to shake his hand. Matt Fryer, I turn around, I hear the countryest voice I've heard. Oh, there he is. So we got to say hey to him. Tremel Jones came up and sat next to us with, I believe maybe some of his family. Didn't even bother him, but it's just you never know who you're going to see, who you're going to get to talk to. Of course, Willie Jones. Also, I don't think I mentioned him. He made it to the tailgate, like a third generation Florida State player. Super nice guy. So it was great meeting him as well. And if I left you out, I'm really sorry, but everybody that attended and everybody that hung out, it was a blast. I think that's it. I think I'm out of stuff. You guys, the number keeps going up. We're up to 412 people in the chat. So I hate to drop this thing off, but I don't really see any more questions. So I guess this is as good a place as any. We love you guys, and we will see you Friday at 7 Eastern unless something changes. And of course, tomorrow at 6 Eastern, you can catch me on the Voice of College Football with Mark Rogers, Chris Frazier of Spear Addicts, James Coleman of Den Media Group, as always. Also, I was on Spear Addicts last night, Monday. So you can go check that one out if you haven't already seen that. We really break down everything that happened with the spring game, the court case, etc. Everything we kind of covered tonight with James and Chris. So again, we love you guys, and we'll see you guys next time. I'll leave y'all with some Carlos Williams and some, fuck the college football playoff, Bama, all these assholes. You know what it is. Trub life.
Hey, man. FSU versus everybody. Let's go. First off, fuck Bama in the roll tide. Fuck Tuscaloosa in every city that's close by. Bitch ass hillbilly redneck fans. Auburn almost caught y'all slacking like dress fans. Michigan trash, they ain't got a damn chance. Only Wolverine I respect is X-Man. Keen ass coach got exposed, still in plays. Damn right I'm bitter, y'all sweeter than